I'll do that as soon as I am shown as the speaker. That's Rick. Okay, Corey, can you make me live on the screen?
Yes, you can share, Lance.
You're live.
Great. Okay. Welcome, everyone, from wherever you may be. Good afternoon. My name is Lance Brown. I'm the president of the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this event, our second in a year-long series of discussions with thought leaders around the world on our progress towards greener cities. Our guest today, Washington Fajardo, is a central figure in the Rio de Janeiro's planning and growth policy. It's my pleasure to introduce him and moderate today's program. I count him a good friend, and he makes me nostalgic for the city of Rio. For those attending who have requested AIA continuing education credits, you will receive one learning unit. You have to stay for 45 minutes, and you will find on the screen directions for how to self-report, which is the method we're using for today. You'll also find the information in the chat, and you will also find that information reposted at the end of the event. You take down the number, you go to the AIA site of your choice, local or national, and you go to the self-reporting function. And this information will be accepted. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the organizer of this series, the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, is devoting to building bridges between the United Nations, civil society, design professions, businesses, academia, and allied organizations. The CSU mission ranges from increasing awareness about emerging issues, obviously pandemic at this point in time, facilitating knowledge transfer between and among policy and decision makers, planners and designers, and fostering connections and cooperation and collaboration, which we encourage you to take advantage of even today. We all at the same time promote the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, especially Goal 11, which we were privileged to participate in the creation of, and the New Urban Agenda adopted at the 2016 Habitat 3 meeting in Quito. We'd like to thank our partners who participate in this series with us, the UN Habitat Office in New York, the AIA New York chapter, the UN Habitat Professional Forum, the NGO Committee on Sustainable Development, New York, Columbia University's CBIPS program, CEL, the Creative Exchange Lab, and the AIA New York Committee on Planning and Urban Design, and of course, and last but not least, the Office of Perkins Eastman and their entire team in New York and Washington for being such good partners and helping with the platform for this series. I want to give special thanks to Rick Bell, a good friend, colleague, and dynamic CSU board member for spearheading this Green Cities series. I invite everyone to visit our website, see our resources, see our publications, and check on our upcoming events, including next month's Green Cities event from Barcelona with Josepa Bohigas, Director General at Barcelona Regional. Washington Fajardo. Washington is a Brazilian architect and urbanist devoted to recycling Brazilian cities. After graduation, Washington began his award-winning career in research, architectural practice, urban design, exhibition design, and critical writing before becoming the president of the Rio World Heritage Institute. From 2009 to 2016, Washington was Rio de Janeiro's mayor's special advisor on urban issues. I met him slightly, I think, before that, and he convinced me of his deep knowledge of the city. He developed innovative solutions to Rio City's planning, pushing the definitions of historic preservation towards a more exciting place as a design platform, and then he became the curator of the Brazilian Pavilion at the 2016 Venice Biennale. Harvard University awarded Washington the prestigious Loeb Fellowship for the class of 2019 at the Graduate School of Design, and he subsequently became a visiting researcher at the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies. He's authored 2 books on Rio, Rio's Urban Transformation and Rio's Avenues. This year, 2021, Washington was appointed, not that many months ago, the planning commissioner and president of the Pereira Passos Institute for Urbanism. He's in charge of preparing a new Rio de Janeiro master plan, already concluding an urban recovery plan for Rio's downtown hard hit by the COVID pandemic. In addition, Washington is directly responsible for the Revivify Plan, aiming a bold housing stimulus to the city's downtown. We'll hear more about that. He has plans also to bring use new technology to help shift the paradigm of the favelas. On a more personal note, I recall having an intimate lakeside dinner with Washington in Rio de Janeiro prior to the Rio Olympics, critical time in Rio. It was tense time. Olympic planning process was at painful loggerheads with the informal communities that come under pressure in every location at such times. Washington shared his profound knowledge of the birth and growth of the city of Rio, its complex morphology, history, topography, demography, inequality, heritage, and the iconography, and his great love for this extraordinary metropolis. He evidenced such a tangible concern for the city as a whole, as well as its parts, and I thought then how fortunate Rio was to have such a unique champion available to help guide its future. I look back and realize how prophetic a thought it was given his role and leadership today. I know there'll be a lot of questions. Please use the Q&A function to submit your questions, and we will try to respond to as many as we can. And now I give you my distinguished colleague and good friend, Washington Fajardo. Washington.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to see you again. Sadly, remotely, but I hope you can get together sooner. Thank you so much, CSU and Perkins and Eastman for this invitation. So I will start my presentation. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you see my screen? Can you see my lecture, my presentation? All right. So I'm going to, during my presentation, mainly I'm going to talk about the downtown of Rio, but I want to use that as a allegory to have a deep understanding of the urban patterns of the city, especially how the city had been growing in the last decades and what kind of challenge Rio is facing. And this Revivify, that's the translation for the Portuguese word reviver. That means it's a palindrome, and that means that you can read the word that there is the same meaning from the front to the end, at the end to the front. It's also an homage to the resilience of the downtown area. But before talk about the Rio's downtown, let's talk about the symbolic aspect of Rio. And this is a gross primary productivity world map. And really need to move forward from the definitions of the GDP and only the economic understanding of development. And I think that's an urgency, especially in this pandemic time. And we really need to strengthen our connection of nature. And cities have been a really important platform to fight against the alienation of nature. And historically, Rio, since the arrival of the Portuguese, the city of Rio was also very associated with nature, with the presence of nature, not only as a resource, but also as a utopian aspect. When the Portuguese arrived here, and not only the Portuguese, but the French, the Dutch, all the European presence in Brazil's nature were very impacted by this astonished and really ubiquitous nature, not only the size of the trees, the size of the leaves, but this ecological system, and even by the presence of naked natives in this country. So would be a garden, the God's garden, or it would be a place for development. And I think this is spiritual aspect of nature. It's something that we need to discuss again. In the history of Rio formation, so the city, the nature assumed the role of the monument. As you can see, this engraving from the 19th century in a picture that I took myself, try to locate the same position. So as you can see here, nature in Rio works like a built environment, works like a landmark reference, and not only defining the possibilities of urban growth, but also defining our way finding around this such a complex place. And here you can see the downtown area. So the downtown area of Rio, it's very located inside of the Guanabara Bay. And because Rio was the capital of Brazil, and he was a port city, and that means that it was a very open city to new ideas. And Rio, it was not only a city, but it was a place for political representation. And over time, since the imperial time to the republic times, Rio was changed by new urban ideas, like the ideas of the beauty city, like it was done in the Alfredo Gash plan, or the ideas of modernity and the continuous building, like Corbusier scheme for the city, or like the Constantin Doxiadis plan in 1965 as a first master plan to organize the territorial integration in the city. And then the city lose the capital condition to Brasilia. And then the city had to start by itself to plan itself. And that was the first master plan for the city, done by public servants, done by architects and engineers like public servants, and not anymore by just one mind. And it's a really holistic master plan, and till now still defining some process of urban development in the city of Rio. Here I'm comparing, just to give you some glimpse of the geographical position of Rio. So Rio and São Paulo, they had a really good proximity. It's a little bit more than than 400 kilometers. But as you can see here, São Paulo became a really important economic hub for the hinterland of Brazil. So all the agribusiness and all the mining production of the hinterland of Brazil got São Paulo as its gateway. And Rio historically had only this political relevance. And at the moment that the city lost the capital to Brasilia, the city till now it's fighting for define his new role as not only as a place but also as an economic area. And here's a very complex site, as you can see here. So in this image, I increase the vertical axis to give you a better idea of the impact of the system of mountains in the city. So here it's encapsulated by a system of mountains and also with two systems of hills inside of the city. And here's again the downtown area. So why downtown area is so important for the city? Because it's the main economic engine for the whole metropolitan area. We got the highest rate of jobs in the whole metropolitan area. The city of Rio, it's 6 million inhabitants, but in the metropolitan region, it's 12 million. And we got more than 100,000 jobs in this region, just in this perimeter, as you can see in the screen. But sadly, we have just a little bit more than 40,000 inhabitants living downtown. That means that we have every day a really strong commute, people moving from all the metropolitan area, moving to work and to do business, but not to live. That means that this really important site for the whole metropolitan region had only 8 hours duration. We need a 24-hour city in downtown. And as I said before, historically, the downtown was the main stage for the political representation. That means that we have been changing this center, the center of the city, especially into the 20th century. Almost each decade, we had a really massive transformation downtown. As you can see here in the sequence of image showing how we move from this human scale environment to a monumental, or I would say even sometimes a more global urban scale. So the influence of European in Rio, it was responsible for creating the first biggest avenues in the city, like the Central Avenue. That was done mostly in 4 years, not only the avenue, but all the buildings were done in 4 years. Or let's remove a hill of the downtown like we did in 1922 and open the downtown for new urban development, or open new avenues for cars like we did in 1945. And then especially after, in the 50s and so on, the downtown assumed this position as the central business district for Rio. And that means that the rule of the cars into the urban design was really catastrophic, and even building really terrible infrastructure like this elevated highway that we could finally tear down during the Olympic time. But it doesn't mean that Rio, it's the downtown, it became a more sustainable site. Actually, what the COVID is showing us, that Rio, the downtown area, is really fragile environment, and especially the rate of closing businesses and people working from home. That means that we have more than 500 businesses closing in downtown. That's really problematic for Rio's metropolitan area. But when we look back and we try to investigate the housing production in this region, it's really a very low production of housing, mainly real estate looking for investors and not real housing for people. And we want to change that. That's my main role right now. The moment that I assume this new position, I have been working since the beginning of the year, and we already finished this new law for the downtown that is going to make possible to increase the building renovation for housing purpose. And we had bad public space conditions in downtown, not in the main business center, but in the borders of the business area. We had bad quality for public space, and we want to change that. Because when you look for 5 minutes radius for public transportation, it's a really magic place to live in. You can really understand this historical public investment, making infrastructure, transportation in downtown. We have been using very interesting data to have a accurate understanding of the closing of buildings and office buildings in downtown. We have been using electricity consumption data sets to evaluate what's going on in downtown, so we can have a really precise grid where is concentrated the highest amount of closing office space. All right, let's see again the whole city. And this is a map showing the households in Rio. And just to give you one idea, the Brazil minimum wage, it's 1,000, around 1,000 reais. That means almost $200. And as you can notice, here it's a very unequal city, and the inequalities, the household inequality is essentially defined by the shoreline. That means the wealthiest part of the town, the wealthiest people live near the ocean, and the interior of the city, it's essentially workers and medium class and lower middle class society. But at the same time, everybody works in the downtown. That's why downtown could also have a special role on promoting more social integration in Rio. But that's the critical issue regarding the Rio's urban growth. The city in the last 2 decades have been growing in the west zone. Why? Because essentially that's where the cheapest land it's available, and that's really problematic for the city, because it means that we have been increasing the bad commute in the city, bad transportation, and also converting nature into a built environment, sometimes without infrastructure. And that means also the access for public service, and especially access to public health, as you can see here in this picture, it's also really problematic in the West Zone. And that's as you can see in the picture, and at the same time, you have a really good network of public health facilities near downtown. So why allowing people to move to so far? It's related with the land use, and also related with the lack of public housing policies in Brazil. And once again, you can see the jobs concentration in the metropolitan area of Rio. The main jobs are concentrated in downtown, so it makes no sense not using this land as a really important land into a broad way of speaking for housing, for social integration, and also for preserving the environment in the borders of the city. And in this, sorry, I couldn't translate everything for English, but here you can see, here got the worst time travel in the metropolitan areas of Brazil. It's more than 60 minutes to move on to your place to other places. It's really problematic. And that means also this problem of mobility, it's also really problematic for social integration. In this picture, you can see in orange the favelas, the informal settlements, and you can see in blue the illegal subdivision. This is a new phenomenon associated with this really bad federal program to housing with really easy and cheap housing subsidies that have been captured by construction companies and increasing the urban expansion, and not only Rio, but in the most of Brazilian cities. That means that, and this is a really brand new material. I just did a helicopter flight yesterday, and to give you some ideas about these illegal subdivisions in the west zone of Rio. That's not the common image of Rio. We are, as you can see, it's not about beaches or nature or outdoor lifestyle. As you can see, it's nature being converted to built environment, agricultural land, and really bad, and not only bad, but really the lack of urban infrastructure, and sometimes done by criminal groups. So it's a really complex situation associated with bad regulation, huge demand, and the lack of support from federal policies. And it's also an environmental problem. Again, as you can see, all this construction without regulation, without a legal permit, create also other informal and sometimes criminal activities, like the business of construction debris run by mobs, and this is very problematic in the west zone of Rio. And that means that we have been growing without jobs. So jobs are located in downtown, and people have been living really far from jobs. That means also that we have been growing without infrastructure, and because most of the subdivisions are informal, that means that we don't have also taxes to support new infrastructure. That means that we became stuck into a cycle of continued informality and lack of revenues to do public investments. So that's why downtown, it's again strategic for the city. It's not really about recycling a historical center. It's really about change the urban growth direction. And what we want to do in the Revivify Plan, we want to preserve existing housing and build more housing, building more housing by doing recycling of office buildings, and also supporting new, where it's possible, supporting new buildings. We are going to give a strong stimulus to retrofit in downtown. Also, we want to improve the public service and improve the quality of public space. We need to change the reputation of downtown, very associated with just a place to work or doing business and not a place to live in. And that means that we need also to have a communication plan of that. And also doing that by civic engagement. That's really important for downtown. So the Revivify Plan got this framework organized by a new law, by Mayor's Act and executive orders to improve the quality of the public space. And we have been working to a task force among different public service, aiming to produce a design guideline for downtown, and using this design guideline associated with a civic board. So that means they are going to sit together with local owners, local people who live in the area, and by participatory process, taking solutions together. This is really important. This is something that we never did before, and I'm very optimistic about this new approach. Regarding the retrofit, the conversion of office spaces into housing, essentially we are going to promote a deregulation for housing conversion. That means we are going to consider a building as a consolidated law existence. That means that we shouldn't overlay it with new regulations. This is really important to make possible the conversion of office spaces into a housing space. That means that are going to allow also the increase of internal density of buildings. We want a better ground level qualities. And for sure, it's really important to have a better safety and fire safeties and all the escape safeties. Had a really good security system into this reconversion. We are going to give taxes exemptions. We are not going to ask for parking in these areas. And we want also to give a special condition for affordable housing production. But before talking about social rent, I want to just give you some other interesting aspect of downtown, of Rio's downtown, which is the use of the rooftops of building. We don't use the rooftops in Rio, and we have this fantastic landscape in the city. So we are going to give a lot of territorial freedom, and we want to learn from the past, especially from 50s and 60s, when you have a really interesting architecture using the rooftops as gardens. And we believe that could attract more people to consider to live in downtown. Not only gardens, but also urban agriculture. And at the same time could be a urban farm with one of the most beautiful views of the planet. And we want also to use that as affordable housing production. That means this is it's a challenge because we don't have these type of policies in Brazil. The last 2 years, I have been studying the housing policies, and essentially we are going to give better benefits for developers who produce units for a city program for social rent. And we have been designed this unit, affordable, this accessible housing unit for students, for university grads, and also for affirmative action grads, because we believe that downtown could be also a platform for better social and racial integration in Brazilian cities, and also for public servants' families. And I'm very optimistic about that. It's going to be a challenge to implement this huge shift in housing policies in the country. But we have been we have been dealing with really good comments on the society and also developers, and I'm very optimistic about it. This is a very complicated image, just to give you the finance system that we created to create a better stimulus to the downtown. Essentially, that means that developers who build house in downtown, they are going to have building bonus into other areas. Because the crisis of downtown is also a crisis of land use competition. Some areas are more attractive for developers in the cities, and we want to connect the downtown with this area. So developers, they are going to be able to buy more building permits in profitable areas, and all the payment is going to be reinvested in downtown. And we really want to create a cycle process of revenues for downtown. We are going to give some exemptions in some sectors of downtown, and that's the kind of bonus that are going to give to developers. We are going to allow them to build more into more consolidated area, but not bigger than the local. It's essentially an infill policy as a stimulus to downtown. All right, but it's not only affordable housing. We design also long stay housing for homeless people in downtown. And we want also to implement architectural assistance for home improvement in downtown. We have a federal law in Brazil that is quite interesting aspects, that maybe something that we should consider a new lecture for that, Lance. But it's a very interesting policy in Brazil, not so well implemented yet, but essentially the public architecture. That means the rule of architect supporting people who can't pay for that. And this federal law in Brazil allow governments to pay for architectural service for people who couldn't pay for a professional. And we are going also to improve the qualities of the historical fabric, urban fabric in the city. And also we want to have a critical understanding of the historical preservation, recognizing native history and Black Brazilian historical sites as well. Also, we want to promote better public space and public art. And we have been doing that during the pandemic time. We have been doing that on using digital platforms, civic, and we have a really fantastic feedback on that. We have more than 5,000 comments and contributions from the society, and we have several rounds of inquiries. And it's interesting to see people want to live in downtown, people don't want to use car in downtown, but at the same time, people feel afraid of the public space in downtown. And for the end, one more thing, we are going to launch this dashboard, a 3D dashboard for downtown of Rio, essentially allowing people to see the building permits online. This is a public information, but it's not so easy to access this information, and we want to offer a contextual information on that. As I said before, it's not only about downtown, but it's considered downtown as an engine for rechange the urban growth in the city, attracting people for this urban priority zone. Why it's a priority? Because it's an area covered by public transportation. It's from downtown to the extreme part in the north area of this district. We have a 20 minutes commutation, but we are not growing here. And that's something that I want to change in our master plan for the city. But the challenge here is related with the presence of a mosaic of favelas, from really big favelas, but also our network of small favelas. And that's the final comment on my presentation. In order to do that, I have been researching, I have been collaborating with MIT Sensible City Lab into technological solutions for favelas. We need to be more imaginative. We need to be more creative, considering informal settlements. And I'm very concerned about the digital invisibility of favelas. And also, for sure, the health problems that is still going on in places like Rocinha, where we still have to deal not only COVID, but also tuberculosis. And these, and we are going to use LiDAR technology in order to create a digital twin for the favela. And by doing that, we can use machine learning solutions to convert favela into a big data. And by doing that, we can have a more precise accuracy regarding quality of ventilation, quality of insulation. And then I'm going to give you some idea here into this video. So this project is called Favela 4D, and that was my main research when I was during my time at Harvard. I was making these questions: why we are not using science rock technology for planet Earth? Why we know more about the surface of Mars than we know where there's 1 billion people living. So why we are not using the same level and the same amount of energy and research to solve human problems? And this collaboration with MIT Sensible City Lab, it's making possible to answer those questions. And I'm very optimistic about it. And we have been working on the funding process for this research. Is not so expensive, I must tell you, but we can create a new approach for favelas. And the possible applications for that is essentially, the first one is having a very good data for favela. We don't know, we still have not so clear information about informal settlements. The second level of a field of application is engineering, modular fabrication, and having a more efficiency and also more time-able infrastructure. And maybe the third field of application is related with property titles. Can we convert this digital twin of a house in a favela and using blockchain to create a property title? That's a question. We don't know the answer yet, but it's something that we have been working really hard on that. That's it. Thank you very much, Lance. I hope I did it on a good time.
It was the timing was perfect. And thank you. I have to comment and congratulate you on your attempt to compress what is, in fact, such a complex series of issues that many cities contend with. Not all of them contend with the degree of complexity. I'm reminded as I looked at your presentation of your focus on the downtown, something that New York had to go through starting 20 or 30 years ago to mix its use. But at the same time, the French city of Paris, which was experiencing development beyond anything it ever planned for, what you referred to as the illegal developments. So this is a push-pull situation that is a bit broader than many have to deal with, and sandwiched between the favela environment, which I think the use of new technology to try to understand is totally appropriate. We started our series this year, the CSU, with the use of new technologies in dealing with the disaster risk reduction. This idea of the new technologies, smart, not only the smart cities, but the analytical capacities. I would ask just for the attendees, could you say a word or two of definition for LiDAR for those who may not know what it is? You're muted.
Sure, Lance, sure. Sorry about that. LiDAR means light detection and ranging. That it's would be a laser able to convert the built environment into XYZ coordinates into a vectorial realm. And this vectorial realm also it's associated with images. This is something that's the core technology behind driverless car, just to give you one example. And it's very used into for as-built productions into industrial complexes, and also it's quite well used also in historic preservation. I mean, in the field of architecture, but till now we don't use that for such a complex place like favelas, because into favelas there is no one house like other. Each house it's a singular event. That means the mathematical complexity of favelas are huge. That means we need more computational capacity for doing that.
Thank you. That's the good description. And when I said early in the introduction that I had a certain nostalgia, part of it had to do with moving through the favela you showed, Rocinha, and understanding that not all the passageways were visible from the air. There were tunnels through buildings and things, which in order to map, you have to use this technology. It also raises a question in terms of your approach to downtown and the issues of the favela. I'm going to dig deep for detail. My understanding is in a favela-like informal settlement, the amount of public space may not exceed 5% of the land area, whereas in a downtown, it may be 25%. Then there's the question of the equity of open space. You have high density with less open space and low density with a great deal of open space, which should be a selling point. But on that high density, you have a vast sense of community. And in the low density, of course, the traditional commercial core, you may have very little community at all. So I guess the question is, how do you create the sufficient community attraction to not revitalize, as you said, to alter the downtown configuration, make it attractive for people to occupy?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's the main challenge in this project, Lance. Downtown, the Rio's downtown, it's an urban masterpiece. We have the most beautiful public spaces in the whole metropolitan area. We got a lot of cultural venues, theaters, movie theaters. We have libraries. We have all the public goods that we need to build in other areas. So that's a challenge. We need to attract more people to consider to live in downtown. That's why we need to move the housing production. It's what is going on right now in downtown is essentially studios for CEOs, but we need place for families. And that's why we have been considering this, how to promote the cultural aspect and how to promote these qualities of downtown as a neighborhood. And that's why I mentioned the communication strategy for that, because we still associate downtown as the city, like people said in the past, I'm going to the city. That means that I'm going to the downtown to work. We need to change that. I'm going to Central. I'm going to downtown because I live there. I didn't tell you that, but for doing this work, I rent an apartment in downtown for 1 week, and I live in downtown for 1 week. I did this personal experience because, as you might remember, that I know a lot about downtown as architect, as a researcher, but I never lived there. And it was quite interesting expand 1 week in downtown, Lance. I could notice the difference of the sounds. I could notice that it's not so hot like in other parts of Rio because the position within the Guanabara Bay. But I also could notice how it was hard to do the groceries. I have to walk 20 minutes to buy eggs, and especially talking with women who live in downtown, I had a really impactful knowledge because women told me that they don't feel safe in downtown. They have to plan before go outside. And this is a kind of knowledge that we as planners, as men, we don't understand that. And living there for 1 week was really helpful to design this proposition.
Thanks so much. We have a couple of very good questions from the audience. We'll try to cover as many as we can. One of the questions talks about something that I think a lot of cities are going to have to address in the pandemic environment, and the conversion of or adaptive reuse of commercial space. It's the discussion about the quality of indoor spaces of residential buildings. How do you ensure the quality of indoor space in the buildings in the city center as you move towards making them residential? You were very, very clear in showing the massing for the block configurations. Is there something about the interior of buildings that you're looking at as well?
Yeah, this is important aspect. We don't want micro-size apartments in downtown. That's not what I'm looking for. The building regulations in Rio had a very strict minimum size for apartments, which is around 29 square meters. But when you look to the age of buildings, especially the age of offices building, we have essentially two ages of building. You have buildings made from the 30s to the 40s, and these buildings were very good for being converted to housing. And then we have a second generation of buildings done from the 50s to 70s, and then a third generation, 70s till now. These last one are the most challenge to be converted to housing space, because the buildings are more technological. That's why we are going to give more incentives to the not to the oldest, but to the newest age of buildings. But we are not going to allow the micro-size apartments.
Okay, thank you. By the way, that was a question from Tina Pastor. I'd like to go to the distaff of that question from Bonnie Harkin, commenting that, Rio is, as you said, very well known for its historic public spaces. Could you say more about the role of public spaces as the catalysts for the downtown revitalization?
Thank you, Bonnie, for your question. Good hear from you, Bonnie. Yes, you are totally right. Our plan is essentially divide on private domain and public domains. That means it's not only about doing recycling buildings, but essentially the role of public space. So that's why we create a lot of finance solutions to support public art. The quality of the downtown, it's really a good platform for public art. We want also to use that finance solution to support bike lanes in downtown, and also really change the walkability quality of the area. As I said before, the quality of the sidewalks in downtown are really good. It's the best in the metropolitan area, actually. But we need more. We don't have till now a really good urban furniture. We need. There's a lack of benches, just to give you one idea of the kind of thing that we need to improve. And we don't have place to sit in the public space in Rio's downtown, because essentially it's a place to work. And we have been working on all these design guidelines to the public space. It's quite interesting thing, because the city hall forgot how to deal with historical public space, because the city hall were always dealing with a city that is growing, and then we don't know how to deal with historical place. And I have been using all my expertise on the historic preservation to change even the quality of the public service.
I must say, one of the visits I made to Rio was a stroll with Washington Fajardo, looking at historic public spaces and their revitalization. So I know this is something close to his heart and well to point out. But expanding this discussion and going back to the combination of your comment about LIDAR and a comment or two that was made by Teresa Williamson about the nature of public space in favelas, which car-free means mostly it's pedestrian, but of course it's also makes very heavy use of its rooftops. And I'm wondering if in the LIDAR application, there will be a way in which the actual usable public space in the favelas gets to be compared to the actual usable public space in the downtown, that formal versus the informal public space, especially since the whole idea of public space has now, as we all know, become synonymous with public health. And the idea of maintaining a healthy society is going to be so heavily dependent on the development, the use, the conversion, the availability of that public space.
That's interesting, and thank you, Teresa, for that. Yeah, favelas are a place where you can feel the community sense into a favela because of all the togetherness and people living close and developing a lot of solidarity connections. That means that people really have a really strong community feeling. But regarding the built environment, we still face a lot of problems, and especially the micromobility sometimes is not so good. It's quite hard to walk after doing your groceries, like I said, in downtown. Downtown, you have to walk a lot, but it's easy to walk. In favelas, you have to walk uphill sometimes, and also in very problematic network of streets. And I believe that by using this data approach, we can have a more science-oriented definitions and really making possible to see the really problematic mobility and create engineering solutions to solve that. Because it's also quite hard to do public constructions in favelas because the built environment is so geometrically complicated that essentially you take design decisions on site. And by using LiDAR, you can just build up, let me give you an example, Lance. You can build a stair off-site and just build into the place. And that will also help us to see the quality of insulation and ventilation. And that can help us to produce a contextual zoning for favela, allowing us to define where is good, where is the right place to be verticalized, and where is the place that we shouldn't allow more buildings. Relate with environmental qualities, and especially relate with the promotion of a really good public sharing a good public health, environmental health, I would say.
Washington, I'd like to just use the last minute or two, if we go over it, for going back actually to the very first question that was raised by Carlos Borjaquez. I hope I got the pronunciation right, which was really looking at a sustainable public transit system. You were very, very clear on the maximum connectivity between downtown and many of the areas. You didn't talk as much about the network or the réseau through the rest of the metropolitan region, which may allow that to function more or less well, connecting whatever they may be, the illegal settlements, the favelas, and so on. In the short time available, since this is a question that talks about the whole rather than the pieces, that's the nature of transportation. Can you say a word or two about how the regional metropolitan transportation system is being looked at, or to what extent?
First of all, I must explain to the audience, Lance, that the city hall didn't control the rail system and also the subway system, and that's really problematic in Brazilian cities. But we do have data from the state government that's who's control the planning for urban transportation. But my point here, it's I would say that it would be easier than that because it's a very consolidated network of mass transportation. And we have 3 lines of 2 lines for train railroads, and we have 1 lane for the subway lane. And But what's going on? That's we have been losing population in this region. That's so problematic, and that's something that we want to change. How to change that? We need a new master plan, and how to do that? We need to increase the density in this area, and we need to increase density using really good urban design, and especially at the same time increasing the green areas. That's the really problematic thing in this part of the town, and so it's because it's a mosaic of things. So it's also the presence of favelas in this particular region of the town. That means also better policies for favelas. And that's why I want to use technology to make it possible to deal with such a complexity into a faster time. I wouldn't mention that so much in my lecture, just final words. It's also related with the role of the designer, the role of architects in Brazilian cities. I have to fight also against this idea of modernity, of the idea of the expansion of cities as a way of inclusion. It's not working anymore in Brazil, and we need to change that.
Listen, I think we're slightly over the time. I want to again, thank you for your presentation and your discussion of these issues. Some of these issues obviously are actually global issues. Other ones are very local issues. I think you've opened up conversations that are going to continue. I think you've presented challenges that we all appreciate and to some extent experience, which is the purpose of this. It's an exchange. I must say one of the memorable exchanges that we think we had in the past was over the Olympics that Rio was planning and the Olympics that London had and the beautiful interchange between things. So hopefully there are people on this Zoom who will ask and answer questions related to things that you brought up. I know that if there's a way of posting somehow the information you're developing with MIT, there were one or two people who were interested in noting more about LiDAR or that whole investigation. So that if there's a way of quickly saying what that is, but I always try to respect the time we set for this. So the biggest thing I can do is say thank you. The biggest thing I can do for the audience is to say go to the chat for continuing ed. The last thing I can say is 1 month from now, we will visit Barcelona and Josep Bohigas, who will talk to us about our events there. And once again, please visit our website, the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization. With that, I think I'm going to wish you all a wonderful afternoon or evening, depending on where you're connected. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Bye, my friend.
Bye-bye.